Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, and best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to learn how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're very happy to have you here at this Empower host in RPA. I'm Xina Seaton, one of the co-founders of Women in RPA and the Vice President of Customer Experience at Blue Prism. And I'm very happy to have with me three panelists today, two from Blue Prism and one from Thames Water. They are Nikki North, David Lerma, and Bindi Basan. You guys give a wave? They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment, but just wanted to tell you that today what we're going to be talking about is diversity. It might seem like we focus a little bit more on gender diversity as we are women in RPA, but we really want to open the conversation to all types of diversity and really talk about what we should be challenging in the world around us in order to improve equality for everyone. So as my panelists introduce themselves, I want to throw up a quick poll and get you guys engaged about what we're going to be talking about. So Charlotte, if you can put up the poll, we will jump into introductions. Nikki North from Thames Water, let's start with you.
Hi everyone. Yes, so I'm Nikki North. I work for Thames Water as an RPA lead. I started working with RPA back in 2006, so a very long time ago. So long ago that we didn't actually call it RPA back then because that term didn't get invented for about another 6 years from when I started. It was very early days when I started on my journey. Been from the version 1 of Blue Prism. We had 2 PCs and a switch box, none of the sort of fancy virtualized stuff that we have now. And I spent the last 15 years working my way around different roles in RPA, learning all the different skills and all the different roles that are sat within the Centre of Excellence. And I joined this session today because I want to choose to challenge the perception that you need to have a certain technical background or you need to have a certain graduate background in able to be successful in a role in technology. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Yes, you're a true pioneer in this space, and we look forward to digging into that a little bit more with you. David, let's go to you, David Lerma, to introduce yourself.
Yes, hello. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is David Lerma. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations here at Blue Prism. I've been at Blue Prism for 2 years now, but my career has spanned don't want to date myself, but about 20 years all in high tech. So from software, hardware companies, all in marketing roles. And when thinking about this session, I came to the realization, and looking back at my career, that predominantly the vast majority of the teams that I've been on, and the roles that I've been on in the organizations that I've been in, the teams have been majority women, which I had not really thought about that at the time. It was just something that a realization now, and leading into this session, which I think is actually really great, and it's a testament, I think, to the teams and the organizations that I've been into, whether intentionally or not. But when I look back on it, I think it's great that there was some diversity there and some representation. So really looking at this session and the choose to challenge mantra, it's really about just recognizing times that there is some kind of bias or some not attention to diversity, and me as a man calling it out and being an advocate for change.
Thanks, David. I appreciate that. We really need more of our male colleagues to see this as an issue for them to take up as well and to speak out. So thank you so much for being here, and look forward to having you share some more later in the hour. Bindi Basan, let's have you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really looking forward to today's session. So I just want to give you some insights into me. So I've been stranded at 18,000 feet in the snow in one of the highest mountain ranges in the world. I have won a bronze medal at Shotokan Karate competing in Japan, and I've also choreographed a dance piece for the Belgian princess. So really what I wanted to, and the purpose for highlighting that, is that our experiences shape who we become. My career has been a true reflection of that. I've had the opportunity to work with some tremendous people, work in multiple countries around the world, really mastering the art of building high-performing teams, getting people to shift mindset, think in a different way, and helping businesses to recognize how shifting their thinking can really help them drive value and outcomes for their business and the customers. So I joined Blue Prism in 2016. At that point, we didn't actually have a physical presence in Asia Pacific, and I was brought on to set up the services team in India. Very quickly, because the rate that we were growing, that became Asia Pacific, and before I knew it, I was setting up the whole customer-facing capability across the entire region, including Japan, all at the same time. So today, I lead the customer office in Asia Pacific, which I classify as probably one of the most culturally diverse and complex regions in the entire world. And every single day, I'm inspired to challenge, and my thing for me is really the challenge and the perception that you can't have strong women leaders. I've met some incredible ones on my journey, and absolutely you can. And on every single day, my team challenge me, bring creativity to the table, and choose to think differently. So I'm hoping that this session will inspire people, but I'm also really excited to hear what my co-panelists will be sharing as well. Thank you, Vivian.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I'm curious to see what they'll be sharing as well. So let's jump right in. We have prepared a few questions to get us all kick started today, but please enter your questions into the questions panel, and we will jump into those probably here in about 20 minutes. So definitely want an opportunity to get to your questions. So Nikki, let's start with you. As you shared with us in your introduction, you're practically one of the co-founders of RPA, right? You were here before it was even called Robotic Process Automation. So that's pretty amazing. And can you share your journey? One of the things that you mentioned you want to choose to challenge is that you have to have a technical background to get into this business. And of course, we as women in RPA always say that you don't have to have a technical background. So share your journey with us and with our audience and how you got to the successful place in your career you are today.
Yeah, sure. So prior to joining the team that I worked in back in 2006, I didn't have a particular career. In fact, I went from college into working for McDonald's, and then I left McDonald's to go and work at a call centre. And when I was in the call centre, I got an opportunity to go and work on a project, testing one of the new systems that we were putting in. And it was a big, long IT project. It got extended, and it came to the time where we were all due to go back to our home roles. This, for me, that would have been back on the phone. And one of the people that was on the team with me had suggested there was a vacancy on his team, and it was something that he thought I might be quite good at. So I bit the bullet and applied for that role, and then I got the job. And it turned out that one of the tasks that I had was running the Blue Prism control room. As I said before, it was on a very sort of young version, and we actually had Blue Prism consultant on site with us. There was no such thing as developers back then. They were the Blue Prism guys that did all that. And over the sort of years to come, I've come from a background of being in a call centre. Like I said, I've been on a big IT project. So to see this tool that could fix all the problems that as a call centre agent I got frustrated with, and I could see how quickly it could deliver things, and obviously it didn't have a name. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we sort of started working with Blue Prism to evolve the role of a business analyst. So once I'd stopped doing the control room, that was the first thing that I did. Then we started to form what testing would look like. So there was a sort of tester role defined. I went on to be an accredited developer. Now, not in the way you do it now. I actually went to Blue Prism head office for a 3-day course, and then I had to have my work assessed. Someone came out to look at one of my processes that I built, but really the technical bit wasn't for me. I managed the service, and then I went to be a senior analyst. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I got the opportunity to step up and have a role as head of RPA. And I think being able to do all those different roles and all those different parts of the Centre of Excellence as we know it today, it just really made me see what it was that I wanted to do. And I realised as I was going through that journey, I didn't really want to do anything else other than RPA, because it's something that I was really passionate about, something that I really believed in, and I thought was a really great thing for businesses to adopt. And it was a really good chance for me to contribute as well. Sometimes you might in tech now, you can start a role and you have to learn about all the things that are going on. You have to assimilate yourself to the environment. But I was lucky enough to be part of creating that environment, working with, there was about 5 foundation customers back then, the Blue Prism world as we have now. I hosted it once on the 25th floor of our building. There was 10 people in the room, and it used to be called the Operational Agility Forum. And so being able to contribute to the revolution that was the version 4 product that came out, a lot of that was feedback, things that we'd experienced along with some other customers and that sort of thing. And I think being part of that journey early on as well, RPA's helped me to grow in my confidence, because being an early adopter, I was invited to go and speak at forums, go and speak at congresses, and I'd never got up on stage and spoke before, and doing panels. Obviously, they used to be face-to-face, now everything's a lot more virtual. And it gave me the confidence to go out and do that kind of thing, because I had something to say and people wanted to listen. And those were the main times when, you know, and from a diversity perspective, I'd look at the agenda and I'd scan down it and think, I'm pretty confident I'm the only woman on there. You never know with names these days, but and that can sometimes be quite difficult, and you look out in the audience and you just see a sea of male faces looking back at you, and it can be difficult. But so the confidence thing, I think, was really good for me. And sometimes I doubt myself as well and think, oh, I was just in the right place at the right time, I was just lucky. If I hadn't have gone then, or if I'd have been working at a different organisation, or if I'd just taken a slightly different path, I wouldn't have ended up there. But then I've reflected on that over the years and thought, back in the early days, there was probably about 10 or 15 people on that team, and only 2 people out of that original team have gone on to be heads of RPA. So it's about, yes, I was lucky to get the opportunity, but I took the opportunity, and I have to remind myself of that and just have a bit more confidence in myself. And I think imposter syndrome is something that we very much feel, not just women. I think everyone can feel it sometime. And I have felt that, I think, mainly since starting work at Thames, because I was with my last organisation for the last 15 years, for the whole of my RPA career, was in one team, one centre of excellence, one business, one industry. And when you move on, you start to think, oh, my experiences were 15 years ago. Is it still relevant? Do people still want to hear what I've got to say? But you do soon realise, for the 3 or 4 things that aren't relevant anymore, there's 100 other things that are still exactly the same. Everyone makes the same mistakes. You can see things come in and your experience is valued. So I don't know if, David, if you've got any experiences in imposter syndrome that you'd want to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, when thinking about imposter syndrome, which really is self-doubt, I think everyone experiences it. It's not just a woman-centric issue. It also applies to men as well. And I think one of the keys, though, is that, just in my experience as a man and being raised as a man, we tend to, it's stressed to us that you need to always be confident and be strong and never communicate, or even just, it's difficult for us to communicate, especially when it comes to something that could be perceived as weakness. So yes, I think various times in my career, I've suffered from some way, shape, or form of imposter syndrome, or I've doubted myself, and actually it may have cost me other opportunities that I very well deserved, but I just didn't really think I was ready for it at the time. And one thing that comes to mind is, sometime midway in my career, there was a time when I was asked to, which I thought is a good thing, I was asked to be like a team lead, but with that came more responsibility, but nothing else to it. So it wasn't a promotion, it was essentially the same thing, but it was just an informal title, but with a managerial type role. And I thought of it as a good thing. I was like, wow, I've been singled out, I've been recognized as that. But there was a part of me, even at that time, who thought, should I ask for something? Should I ask for that promotion? Should I wait and see? If I do this and I prove myself, maybe I will. But it was very difficult for me to do that. And I don't think I really stepped up to the plate. I accepted it as something that was good. But it was me doubting myself in terms of believing that I really deserved that second step, but also taking that responsibility. And even also thinking that maybe I'm not right for that role. And I think in retrospect, looking back on it, I think I did short myself in that respect. And actually, if me today talking to me then, I would be like, absolutely, this is what you should do. Don't sell yourself short. Take that step. Ask for what you believe you deserve. And also say it's okay to feel self-doubt. Everyone feels it. I think another thing is that communication is not really a strong suit. And I'm speaking, of course, it's a generalization, but for men to just communicate that they actually do have doubt, that they are questioning whether they can do this, or that they're just having a challenge with thing, and you can bottle it in, and it could be counterproductive, and instead just make that strong face and be like, I've got this all under control. When that's not a productive way to be, and that's not really a good role model in a sense for anyone. So yeah, I think everyone experiences it, and it's okay. it's okay. I think the one thing that where it doesn't become okay is when you let it overrun your decisions in the process.
Sharing your insights, David, because a lot of times we do think as women or a minority that you have to be that strong face in order to be accepted by the others in the room. So I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and something for us all to keep in mind as we're dealing with our colleagues who may seem like they've got it all together and you have that strong face, but maybe actually underneath do need a little bit more help or support with their current situation or task. So Bindi, I've been waiting to talk to you about this bronze medal that you've won in karate. I do understand from previous conversations that you were a black belt in karate, and you've shared that that was actually a really interesting place to come from and background to have as you entered into the business world. Share your story with our guest here today.
Yes, it's interesting because my friends would they used to laugh at me and say, do you really pay to get beat up? When I was doing martial arts, it's a very male dominated sport, but what it really taught me when I was actually doing martial arts was discipline and self-awareness. But one thing that really stuck with me in that space, and it was probably the first time where I really felt the true power of what I could be. I still remember I was sparring with another person, and when I say male dominated, you're talking like 6 foot tall, strong, men that are actually in the dojo with you. And I remember we'd been partnered off to spar, so that's freestyle fighting. And a guy that I was partnering with, he said to me, he says, I don't care what you look like, I don't care what's your age, your gender. He says, all I can see is that black belt around your waist. And therefore, you are going to be treated exactly the same as anybody with a black belt in this dojo. And it was really powerful. Obviously, I was sat there thinking, if I don't move, this guy is going to go straight through me. And exactly what he intended to do. And he set it straight. And he came at me with all his sheer power, just as he would have done fighting a 6 foot tall bloke as well. And he did, and I moved out the way, so I wasn't injured. But it was really powerful because that sport, even though it is very male dominated, you were respected for what you had, right, achieved. It was the belt around your waist that gave you the respect across the entire team of people in that room. And I thought it was really powerful. Off the back of that, I built a lot of strength mentally and physically in terms of power. And it's really interesting because then I enter the corporate world, and suddenly you're faced with all these society norms and corporate norms and judgments and expectations on the way you probably need to be dressing, speaking and acting. And suddenly that whole thing of achievement for what you've actually worked hard to get, like I did in martial arts, you're now being judged for everything else around that. So it's not just about your experience that you bring to the table. So that was probably really interesting for me. I kick-started with that power, but then I entered the corporate world of then suddenly realizing that things are going to be a little bit tricky here. But I think one of the experiences that I do want to talk about in the corporate world and bring to the table today, and I think it's really important and requires really quite a lot of courage, which I know that people on this panel will have, and people listening will definitely have stories of their own to tell in this space. But I'm a true believer that you just need one hand to be lifted and one voice to completely change the dynamic or change the direction. I remember listening to a quote in a movie, I think it was a dance movie, and I loved this. And it was like, one move can set an entire generation free. And just based on that, just to elaborate on the story that I'm about to tell you. So when I was living in Singapore, the company I was working for at that time wanted to understand how they retain their female staff, but also how do they encourage more women to take on leadership roles. So they got together a forum of ladies, and I was invited to participate in that forum. And I remember I was there with lots of views, and I was, ready to speak up. And the room started, and there were several women that were going before me, round robin, and they were asked about what changes did need to happen, what do you aspire to be, what's your views on the whole topic. And every lady that was before me I felt was representing and speaking in alignment to what she believed that facilitator wanted to hear, which was all positive. It's amazing. I'm really looking forward to expanding my career here. I'm very well supported. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And it got to me and I thought, okay. And I just went, and I just like laid it out on the table. And I was like, these are the problems that you have that we need to address if you want to solve your problems that you've got right now with regards to retention of women and actually moving them up the ladder. And basically then what happened, which I thought was really powerful, was that I spoke up and oh my God, every single woman after me it was all laid on the table, and they just brought all the other issues, all the other concerns, all their suggestions and ideas to the table, and that whole norm of what everybody felt that they had to follow, because I'm guessing society demands it. And there's nothing against the women that didn't speak up, because I know that a lot of them came from societies where it's not the norm to speak up. But what was really powerful for me as an individual is that if I am brave and have the courage to speak the truth and challenge, then just think of, I just walked out thinking I've just allowed the communication channel for all these women that followed me to open up as well, and suddenly the dynamics of the room changed. But I am not the only one that has those type of stories, and I'm sure the people in our audience also do. But Nikki, I'd love to hear from you, because I'm sure you've got several of these examples in your career as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking and reflecting back on my career and trying to think of the times that, where being brave's been something significant. And the main one that I've drawn it back to is that I glossed over it earlier, but when I joined the Blue Prism team back in 2006, and like I said, didn't have much of a CV at that point. It was all customer servicey stuff, because I've been, like I say, McDonald's frontline and then on call centre. And I'd done this little bit of project work, which, to be honest with you, the main motivation for doing that was just because I didn't like answering the phones. It was literally just anything to get me off the phone back in those days. And I think the sort of bravest thing I did was speaking to one of the guys on the project team who had this role that was in his team, and he showed me the role profile, and I looked at it, and it to me, who had no experience in much else, it just looked like a load of technical jargon. And I was just like, no, I absolutely can't do that. But I had to sit down, had a chat with this guy, and he explained and said, look, it's not about looking at the specific wording that they've put and thinking you can do that. Let's talk about the skills that you've got that could line up to that. And I think just having that one person believe in me is the thing that allowed me to be brave and to apply for that job. And if I hadn't have done that, I've got absolutely no idea what my life would be like today. And that's no exaggeration, because at that point I had no university education. I had no goals. I had no desire to do anything really. It was really connecting with RPA as a tool, Blue Prism or RPA as a tool, to give me something that I wanted to do. I've never known what I've wanted to do. I've never been the kid who wanted to be a teacher or a ballet dancer, or my whole life I never really knew what I wanted to do. So I think sometimes listen to other people and be brave enough to not feel arrogant or you're going to be judged for. Women are always looked at sometimes. I think if you want to be successful and you want to be strong and you want to be brave, sometimes you can be labelled in a slightly different way. And I think it's important just to believe in yourself, and bravery that way can sometimes make a big difference.
Being brave is sometimes the hardest thing for us to do, especially being brave for ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to be brave for someone else. So thank you very much for sharing. David, let's put you in the hot spot for the minute. You shared with us that most of your career has been in marketing and high tech, but in marketing, your teams have predominantly been women. So you can on the opposite side of the coin, and you're a man, and yet you've maybe spent your career in the minority position. So I think that would be interesting for us to hear your perspective and how you think that's helped shape you, and how you take what you've learned from that perspective and apply it to challenge maybe some of your male colleagues who don't quite have the same perspective as you.
And yeah, that's absolutely true. I think when you look at it, it's non-traditional in the sense, unfortunately, that I was a majority minority in many cases. And I didn't really, at least early on in those situations, I didn't think any differently. It was just, I was like, hey, I guess this is the way it is, very early on. And so and maybe through that naive lens, I wasn't very mindful of any kind of biases that could be taking place, could be occurring, could not be. I was very much of a heads down because this is the way it is, and let's just go about doing things. But it also allowed me to, you could say, see the other side, so to speak, and really it was just much easier to just work collaboratively and work regardless of who it was. It was just the way I was used to doing things. But that's not to say that there weren't times, and again, I may have not really realized it at the time, but there was one time that I did, in the sense that I was on a, I believe, so I was in a large organization, large team, to where we, within the team, my manager was a woman, and we had pods. So basically we had different work streams where people were put into. And in my pod, I was the only man in that pod. And there was one time when we had this, basically, it might have been a QBR or something, where all of us got together and started going through planning and going through and presenting. And I was asked to, and I wasn't really asked to really contribute a lot in that. I contribute, yes, but not lead anything or not present anything. And so that did raise an eyebrow a bit. But then at the time, short notice, I was like, why don't you take this and present on this? And I'm like, sure, I'll go ahead and do that. And it was really interesting. After, I would say a few days after that, I was meeting with my manager on our one-on-one, and she told me, she goes, you know what, I was really impressed with how you presented that day. And I was like, well, thank you. But in the back of my mind, I was like, nothing has really changed. I mean, I could have done this at any given point, but I'm glad she recognized that. And I was appreciative of that. But in hindsight, I was thinking maybe that was a sense of just biases on the other side, and just seeing maybe there was some preferential treatment going on, and it's just some bias. So those experiences, you take the good and the bad, and I think you learn from all of them. And for me, it's really caused me to be more mindful of any type of bias that goes on, unconscious or not, because I think there's also a stigma when we say, oh, when an issue or a situation is brought to our attention, it's like we get defensive. And it's not necessarily, I don't think it's not necessarily that way. It should be, let me learn more about this, because maybe, if not me, maybe someone on my team was responsible for, or did something, maybe did have some kind of unconscious bias situation, contributed to that. And we need to be mindful of that, and also be mindful of others when they're doing that, and call them out and be advocates for that, because I do believe that champions within an organization can really help get the ball rolling in a positive way. You see it in Bindi's example, where people started actually expressing their true feelings. I think it's also the case in any situation where, if someone comes out and says, you know what, I do think that happened, but let's talk about that, others may be like, you know what, and they may start realizing that, because it is an unconscious thing, and it's not necessarily a negative. It's not like someone is doing that, they're inherently a bad person. It's just that they're just not mindful of what's going on. I know that I've probably been in situations where I've done that, and I would like to be called out for it, honestly. And I think so. I think it's really important to have those champions within any team and with any organization. So yeah, so that's my view from like a minority majority, but I know that there are probably plenty more stories coming from the actual traditional majority standpoint. So Nikki, do you have any experiences from that more traditional sense, coming from being in a very male or a male-driven, male-dominated field, you could say?
So I think it's interesting that you say that as well, because my experience is quite unique. That when Blue Prism first started out, it wasn't necessarily, there was actually quite a decent balance, because there was my sort of two direct managers above me, they were both female. Of the 5 foundation customers that there were 2 or 3 of those that were female heads of. And then as the company expanded, and as obviously it got like a lot more popular, and it was business led at first, so it was meant to be a business tool, it wasn't an IT tool. Obviously, as it's grown and it's evolved, it's come more of an IT. And I noticed the shift when it went into that sort of more accepted by IT world, that then actually it did go to a more male majority type of environment. And then it shifted back, obviously, as a sort of society, we've started to progress, and we're calling out more the inclusion of women. And I always made sure that I tried to balance, when I was recruiting my senior team in my previous series that I left behind, of myself and my 3 seniors, was 75% female, but then the rest of the team was probably more male dominated. Having that culture of female at the top level, it changes the way that you manage your team, and it changes the way that your team behaves, because I think sometimes in a male-dominated culture, things can be a bit more about, I don't want to sort of stereotype people, but the experience I've had has been more about results and about, everything's been a bit more technical and been about understanding, I don't know how I would say it, but it's always been a little bit more prescriptive. And I think the culture that I created with my sort of more female-led was more of a culture of leaning on each other, and we became a bit more of a family in that sort of sense. And that was culture that I tried to create in my last role. And I think the main thing is now, sorry, I've lost my train of thought completely now. Let's look at my notes that I was going to have a look at. Yeah, so sorry. And then the role that I'm in now, apologies, at Thames Water, we've actually got 4 developers and 3 of them are female and only 1 of them is male. So we're seeing that shift in society in general. And I think that's a really good thing. And I know that I said before I was the only presenter on a gender that was female, but actually you see less and less of that now, and you do start to see more female representation, and I think that's a really good thing. But I don't know if Bindi, you've got any other experiences of that majority.
Yes, I think we're definitely in a very male-dominated industry. It's interesting because I think it was early on in my career that I'd probably noticed the comments that were coming, being one of the females in the room. I think as my career progressed, it got less and less, probably because my confidence probably built up. I was a lot more sure in myself, very assertive. But I've also, I think one of the things that I experienced is that I've worked in very diverse teams and with different types of cultures and backgrounds, which has required me to understand them in detail, and also for me to be able to respect the differences. I remember the first time I went to work in India, and oh my God, I would have the UK this year and I'd have India at this year, completely misinterpreting and understanding each other. And really, I sat back and thinking, regardless of your background and your nationality, your colour, your gender, your age, the thing is, though, what we need to do, and I sat back and I thought, you need to recognise the strengths of both sides. And when you recognise that, you come together, it's so much more powerful. So think about what that diversity brings to the team, and therefore, what are the outcomes that you drive. It's not an easy ride. I have been in several situations where I am the only woman in the room, or for some reason, someone deems it appropriate to make a comment about maybe the way that I look, or maybe something I've said. When I later on in my career, when I became a bit more, I'm definitely going to challenge the status quo, I've had senior executives say to me, everybody be yourself, apart from you, Bindi, don't be yourself, because I know that I'm going to actually challenge. So I've come across those scenarios. I think the key thing for me is always being assertive and true to myself and what I believe in, and my respect towards the people that I'm working with. Today, I would probably say with my team, it's a very diverse team, probably also because obviously it's all across multiple countries, but they're all got different backgrounds and they bring different things to the table, and I respect their cultures, I respect their values and principles. But one thing I do have to say is that, and I'm really proud to say this, that if you lined up my entire team in a line, you could pull out anybody, whether they're in Hong Kong or Australia, the principles and values that they operate with completely aligned across that team. And that's really important for me, regardless of their background, regardless of their gender. Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy ride though. I think Nikki, we've definitely got plenty of stories to tell in that phase, and sometimes it's not always been nice, really. You can walk away thinking that wasn't very nice for somebody to say, but I think it's one of those things that maybe it teaches you, and you, like I said earlier, your experiences help you become what you are today. So yes, thank you, Xina.
Absolutely. I'd like to before we jump to the audience question, ask you all of you one more question, and that is, how do you gain the strength to be brave? Right? So if you find yourself in that moment, if you find yourself in the classroom and you're the 4th person and everyone else has just played happy. Bindi, I know you're the kind of person who's just always been brave since, it feels like you've probably always been brave since the day you were born. Nikki, you were in some situations, I'm sure early on you shared with us, you had a little bit of imposter syndrome. David, seeing things happen around you that maybe there's some bias behind it, or maybe it's just a comment that's just not right. People do make those kinds of comments. What is one thing that you could tell people listening is something they can do to muster the strength to be brave in that moment and to do the right thing?
That's a really difficult question to answer. I think the thing that's made me have the confidence to be strong is it's probably the times that I haven't been strong and I haven't been brave and I haven't spoken up, and then it's watching. And sometimes I have been sat there thinking, I should have said that, or I should have said something, and then I feel like the moment's passed. So I think sometimes just having the experience of not standing up and saying something and not being brave, it gives you the motivation next time to feel like you should do the right thing because you made that mistake. And I think, and this is, it's a small tip, and it may be useful or it may not be, but something that always stuck in my mind, which is on a similar sort of topic, is I was speaking to a lady once and she said that it's always difficult to speak in a meeting if you haven't spoken in the first 15 to 30 seconds. If you don't speak straight away, you find it a lot harder to find your voice. So I've always made a conscious decision when I go into a meeting, even if it's just hello, once your voice is out there, you find it a lot easier to speak up. And it didn't really occur to me before. And then when I sat and thought about it, and I thought, oh, actually, yeah, maybe that's why. And I tried it a few times, and I did find that the meetings where I'd said hello or spoke up or just even just, oh, how was everyone? And just had that bit of engagement, I found it much easier then to get back into the conversation later than being a silent voice trying to get your way in, especially because I did a lot of working from home before COVID because of my childcare and things like that when my children were born. And I think it'll be different now, but back then you were very much just a voice in a conference room on a phone that if you didn't speak up, people forget you're there. So I don't know if that's useful for anyone.
That's great advice. Go into a meeting, speak up early, have your voice heard, and then it's easier to engage later on. And David shared something earlier that I think was great advice. So I'm going to mention it again, and then I'm going to put him on the spot to come up with new advice. And that was, what would the future me tell the now me? Right? The future me would tell the now me, do this or that. And I think that's a good question to ask yourself, right? If you're feeling fear in the moment, wait a minute, what would the future me tell the now me to do? Because it brings you that different perspective, as you shared, Nikki, with the having have felt not doing it in the moment. So David, Bindi, you guys?
Yeah, exactly. Echoing what Nikki said, and I think experience plays a role in it, where you see the results of inaction and you feel, is that the result that should, can I play a role now in making a change? I think it is one of those things. And I think also a thing is there's always a perceived, whenever speaking out in something, I think there's always a fear of being perceived of what you're saying or what you're going to say as being a perceived negative. So I think also it's, in many cases, I think this is a general, in any general sense, it's, I often say it's not what you say, it's really how you say it in some respects. So sometimes you can say the best thing, but if your tone or your delivery is just not the best, it may be shut down. So I think also it's just in the way of promoting that idea, and also maybe even just pushing it back and posing it as a question to that person that's speaking, to say, I really think that X, Y, Z, what do you think about that? Or there was a situation. So I think there are ways to go about it, but I think also just trying not to be shut down by any kind of anticipating that and not being perceived as a negative person in that sense, because that's really not the intention.
Bindi, any tips or strategies to share?
Yeah, so I think probably more recently that I've come to realize this. I was probably doing it all my life, actually, to be honest, but it's really become evident in the recent years, is formulate your cheerleaders. Make sure you have a support network, I think, is really important. The times when I'm about to go on stage, or I'm nervous because I'm about to go on a panel or whatever, and pick up the phone to a friend or a mentor or anybody that's actually going to go speak down the phone and basically tell me how amazing I am. And I've had those moments when I've been stressed out or suddenly doubting myself on something, and I pick up the phone and I might be speaking to my best friend, for example, and say, oh, I've just come into this and I don't feel like this, and she's very straight to the point. Can I just stop you there? Can I just remind you when you just took off from England and went to the other side of the world and set up an entire capability in India from scratch after being 5-6 years into your career? And she said, let me just remind you of that. And don't forget that. So I think that's really powerful, having that support network and the people that are around you that are going to cheer you along and constantly remind you how amazing you are. We tend to forget what we've achieved. And especially as women in particular, I think we always don't even believe it's us that's achieved it. So I think I would definitely say make sure you've got a strong support network, and it doesn't have to be just professional. So I know that if I picked up the phone and called my mum, she would just tell me how amazing I am as well. So, and when I was younger, I grew up with my grandma, who was absolutely fearless and, oh my God, such an inspiration. And she would be like, just go do it. No excuses, Bindi, just go do it. And that's the sort of people that you want around you, that are constantly push you and constantly support you.
Yeah, I think all of us at least have one of those mamas, grandmas standing behind us, and I think that also speaks to strong women in your lives, right? They don't have to come from a professional background. They can be your mother, your sister, your grandmother, or a friend's mother, really anyone in your life that can impact you. So let's move to questions from the audience. So I'll just raise your hand, whoever would like to take it. What's the best way to push back when HR does not want to offer you the pay that you feel like you should have, or that is equal to a male counterpart in your business? Any feedback, maybe from the ladies, on how to address that? You've gone up in your career, and Nikki both. How do you make sure you're getting paid fairly for the role that you play?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go first.
Okay. So I think for me, I think talking from experience, when I have had to do this, the important thing was to lay the facts on the table, like properly do my research and clarity on the role that I'm performing and the market research on what that role is getting paid, and to clearly outline the differences if somebody else who's performing that same role is getting paid higher. So it was really backing it up with the data. So there was, in my particular scenario at that point, there wasn't really, and I make my argument in my case quite strong, because if I've got the facts on the table and exactly why this is important and why it's necessary, it made the conversation a lot easier. And also sometimes in some of the cases that I've actually talked about, I've also related it to from a business impact as well. So in some cases, I felt like I've actually advised HR and said, I think you need to consider your internal policies and think about this and this, and maybe made them aware of something that they weren't aware of. I must admit, it's something that I've only, I guess, in recent years. I think early on in my career it was probably a lot more difficult, but now it's, for me, I think it's important to lay the facts on the table and make sure you've done your research and you've got something to back it up. So it's not just give me some more money. That's what's worked for me.
The market research side, but also the impact to the business of not doing that, bring a different perspective to the table. Nikki, I'm curious, with your background that you've shared coming from a customer service world, not a technical world, having been in RPA since the beginning of RPA, as it may be, and seeing it shift from a more business to technical sort of fabrication of a team makeup. How has that impacted your ability to keep on par with the pay, the salary that you should deserve, coming from that background and building and bringing all that experience in, although you might not check the box on a bachelor's degree or whatever the explicit criteria might state, as you say, don't pay attention to that too much?
So I think it was very difficult for me, especially in my previous role, because I think everyone knows when you move in through roles internally in a company, it's always much harder to justify what salaries should be. And I think I probably echo a lot of what Bindi said. And I was lucky that I had a direct manager and even the manager that was a real champion for me and for the rest of my team, and really was ready to go to bat for us. And I've always tried to do that for my team as well. They've looked out for me and supported me. And I think if you're lucky enough to work with people that are your advocates and that will go into those sessions and fight for you, then that's great. And but I would echo what Bindi says as well about getting it all documented and written down, doing your market research and that. I think just something else to add that I did do, which may or may not be good advice, I don't know, but it's something that worked for me. It wasn't for me specifically, it was for one of my team members. One of the ways that we managed to get, because she come from a similar background and was really low graded, but she was an internal move and we needed to do a significant pay rise on her. So one thing that we did do was we proposed staged increments. So we got 3 separate pay rises, 6 months apart, with some specific stuff to hit in the middle. So it may not be ideal, but if it works and it gets you to where you need to be, then that's just something else that you can try. I think everyone's HR departments, everyone's got different processes and procedures and ways to get that approved. But yeah, that's just another angle to go at it, is just to try and do something in increments and just say, look, okay, so 12% pay rise or 30% pay rise, I think it was, will probably not be very appetizing. But what about 10 months, 6 months apart? Can we go with something like that? And so I think it's just about negotiating as well as backing it up with that fact, so you get to the right end place.
Yeah, negotiation. That's something that is another topic we could spend probably an hour on alone. Let's jump to our next question. And David, let's have you jump in on this one. It's around finding a mentor or supporter. Both Bindi and Nikki have talked about finding champions in the organization, whether it be professionally, as Nikki mentioned, that can really look out for you and help pull you up and ensure that you're getting the opportunities that you deserve, or whether it's just someone to tell you how amazing and great you are before you go on the big stage. What are some strategies that you could share that you found successful in working with supporters, finding those champions, finding mentors that can help lead your way?
Yeah, I think from a professional sense, it's really meeting as many people as possible. So I remember in one job that I started, it was about scheduling one-on-ones with as many people in the organization as I could. And that was limited at first to the marketing organization. And that wasn't only executives, that was everyone. And just picking their brain and starting out early in a job is really your chance at just talking about anything. It doesn't even have to be about something specifically related to a project, because you don't really have any at that moment, right? But it can be any time. But I would say schedule one-on-one where it doesn't even need to be a one-on-one about a specific work item. It could just be, I just want to talk, and meet as many as possible, talk to them. And from there, you can identify who would actually seem to be the right one to continue those conversations with. And I think people would be surprised at how many, regardless of the level, if you just schedule some time with someone, and you can even explicitly say this is not necessarily really work related, it's more about just talking about anything, really, how many will be receptive to that? Because I think we have a sense of being, I don't want to bother someone. The only time I can put something on their diary on the calendar is when it's work related or it's important and it has an agenda and it's very specific. But that's not necessarily the case a lot of times. And in fact, in many cases, I think people welcome that and they'll make time for that, because I think many people are willing to do that much more than people realize, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a really powerful word, and the word is help. I need help. And you find very few other humans in the world that when you say I need help, they go, who cares? And they just walk away from you. So it's a very powerful word. And yeah, just inviting someone in, right, to be your champion, I think is good advice. Going to them and inviting them in. So great. Thank you so much. What I'd like to do now is jump and look at our poll and talk a little bit about what our audience told us. So the question was, what do you choose to challenge? And the number one response is diversity doesn't matter. It's all hype. So I love that. I love that. So one of the stories I've heard, having been in this crazy tech world for too long, I won't date myself either, is Twitter. One of the reasons that Twitter has become this bullying platform, one of the perspectives on that was that it was created by four middle-aged white men sitting in a coffee house in Silicon Valley, and that really none of them had ever maybe been the victim of bullying, and therefore they didn't even have that in their minds as they were building this technology. And I thought that was of an interesting way to think about the power of diversity being at the table and being part of the strategy before you even create anything. I'm interested if you guys have experiences where that lack of diversity from the onset, later on you looked back and said, oh man, we really, missed that because there wasn't a female representative or a Black representative or whatever minority it may be that wasn't represented at the table. Any experiences to share there?
I think I don't know if I can recall a specific. I'm sure there's plenty. There's loads, but I think one of the things that I try to speak about, because I don't think a lot of people think of diversity. They just think it's just different types of people, right? But the whole thinking around the different types of people is that their upbringing, their principles, their values, their society is so different to what you have. So there will always be people that will see things that you don't see. And so therefore, one of the things that I always try to focus on is making sure that my blind spots are covered, because if I'm not, then I'm definitely not going to have any competitive advantage. And interestingly, one of the things that when I was hiring my team, my actual line to the recruiter was, bring me people that don't think like me, because I need people I need to see my blind spots. I don't want people that are just going to think exactly the same as me, because then I'm just not going to get the job done and the quality. I can't think of any specific examples, Xina, but I think there'll be plenty, there'll be loads. In fact, right now in the COVID times, I remember times you think, oh, UK was a classic. It was like, Nikki, you'll know, right? Last year when the salons wouldn't open, the beauty salons, so it was okay for a male to go get their beard shaved, but it wasn't okay for a female to have threading done on her face. And I sat there thinking, which woman was in that room when that decision was made? So it's happening every single day in and day out, I think, around us. But yeah, that was probably one of the examples from me.
That's a great and very real example, or something that seems so silly. That why would a man be able to get a shave but a woman can't have a facial or whatever? What's really the difference? It's because men were in the room deciding, and they are the ones who needed the shave. I love that. That's great. Let's see what else. Okay, the next one that came in at the highest is the gender pay gap is just a fact of life. Men will always make more than women. We covered this on strategies for how to go in and stand up for yourself. So it feels good. I believe we got to cover questions from the audience as well as jump into our poll. And we are now at the top of the hour, 59 minutes in. So in respect of all of your time, thank you so much for joining us, Bindi, Nikki, David. Really appreciate your insights and sharing with the group today. And we'll see you next time for another Empower Hour. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.